And President Trump is still determined to punish NATO after a closed-door meeting with the Secretary General of the alliance, Mark Rutte. Before Rutte's arrival on Wednesday, the president publicly stated that he was thinking of pulling out of NATO altogether. Now, after the meeting, he posted this on Truth Social: "NATO wasn't there when we needed them, if we need them again." According to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump is also considering, hear this, a plan to pull U.S. troops out of the NATO countries that he considers the most unhelpful during the war with Iran.
This was a very frank, a very open discussion, but also discussion between two good friends.
Did the president say he was going to try to withdraw from NATO, or at the very least not support NATO as much as other presidents have?
Well, as I said, there is the disappointment, clearly, but at the same time, he was also listening careful to my arguments of what is happening.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Ivo Daalder. He's the former U.S. ambassador to NATO. I know you've been watching this closely, and I wanted to ask you about Mark Rutte's sort of charm offensive. Trump always speaks highly of him, even when he doesn't speak highly of NATO. So was Rutte there just to take the punishment for the leaders that Trump isn't talking to? Like, what do you read and what happened?
Well, actually, it was a long-planned meeting. It just happens to come in a particularly fraught time for the alliance, and what I'd say is the biggest crisis in the alliance in its 77-year history. And Rutte has, in the past, been able to find a way, both through charming and flattering, which is the only way, I guess, people can talk to President Trump, whether Americans or foreigners, find a way to sort of steer him in the right direction. He was pretty successful in the first year of the Trump presidency, the second term. He got an agreement to increase defense spending to a level that the president wanted. Although the U.S. walked away from supporting Ukraine, he found a way in which Europeans could pay for it. But now this is different. The breach is bigger, and I think it's no longer flattery that is going to do things. And I think he was trying to explain what NATO was about, and I'm not sure the president was listening.
No, it's pretty tough, especially after you've had so many leaders of NATO countries speaking out during the U.S.-Israeli strikes. I want to play for you just some of them. The most high profile we know on the end of this spectrum being Spain, and also the French president, Macron. Let me talk to you on the other side of this.
Violence only brings more violence, and that the consequences, economic, environmental, humanitarian consequences of carrying out that ultimatum and the consequences could be terrible for all humanity.
Some people defend the idea of freeing the Strait of Hormuz by force via a military operation, a position sometimes expressed by the United States. This was never the option we have supported because it is unrealistic.
And it's not just this, right? It's backed by actions in terms of overflight rights and access. So there's really concrete issues here that the White House is concerned about. Do you think that's fair?
Well, it's fair to be concerned about it, but I think the White House should be looking at its own behavior to explain it. If you decide to go to war that is generally regarded as illegal under international law and unnecessary because there were many other routes to try to achieve the goals that you were trying to achieve, and you do so without actually consulting, let alone informing your allies that you're doing it, don't be surprised that they may wake up the next day and say, well, wait a minute, we're not part of this. We weren't involved. We weren't asked to be involved. We weren't informed about what it is you're going to do, and now you just want to go out and make sure that you use our airspace and the bases on our territory to do that. We have some questions, and the president has, perhaps skillfully, although to my sense wrongly, taken those steps as the proof positive of something that he's long believed. He's long believed that NATO is more of a burden than a benefit to the United States. He's been saying that for a very long time. He came to the presidency back in 2016 saying NATO was obsolete. There was a couple of weeks where he thought NATO was okay, but he's now back at bashing NATO and finding ways to make, quote, Europe pay for what turns out to be his own mistakes. And as a result, the alliance is so much weaker than it has been for so long, because the president of the United States is basically saying, you sort out your own security, we sort out ours. The problem is that for the United States to sort out its own security, it actually needs NATO, it needs Europe. It can't conduct the war that it has just conducted for 5.5 weeks without access to European bases and European airspace. And so he should spend some time figuring out exactly what it is that Europe does, even when they don't support the United States in the war.
And there's some reporting now about whether or not the White House is considering pulling from certain bases, maybe moving them to other countries. So there's some big questions here about what that action would look like. Ambassador Dalter, thank you so much for talking with us.
My pleasure, Audie.
All right, I wanted to turn to something else that's happening online. Some of the marquee voices in MAGA who had already been skeptical of war with Iran, they have just been speaking out more forcibly since Trump's threats against Iran over the weekend, especially that tweet about going after Iran's whole civilization. And now they're also talking about this 2-week ceasefire.
We're not dealing with the problems in this nation. The problems in this nation do not exist in the streets of Tehran.
You don't threaten to wipe out an entire civilization. We're talking about civilians just casually in a social media post. Completely irresponsible and disgusting.
War. Iran has basically gotten everything it wants in the agreement because Trump was desperate to open the Strait of Hormuz. This is a huge black eye to the United States.
I am a diehard supporter of President Trump, but I'm not celebrating tonight. I don't think that this is good. I think that this actually further legitimizes the Islamic regime in Iran.
Okay, so now we've got this question. Does the president risk losing some of his most loyal supporters with the largest megaphones just months before the midterm election? So you guys are back. I wanted to talk to you both about this because when you look at the actual polling, take a question like, does Trump have a clear plan for handling the Iran situation? MAGA voters, 93% yes. Okay, so we are seeing the MAGA part of the party, self-identified, say we're with Trump. And then, of course, the rest of the GOP, 47%. But who does marquee MAGA represent at this point?
Well, hey,
I would love to
Wait,
find
why?
out.
You're the one who's supposed to answer this one. No, seriously. You were in the first White House. They courted these people.
Yes.
They
courted these people in the first White House, courted these people in the election of 2024, and others, Joe Rogan, some of the other manosphere, and all
who
of
are
that.
also
Look,
unhappy.
All of the individuals that you just put on there, Alex Jones included, who's got a big legal bill to pay, if we want to bring up a lot of things. Conflict sells. These individuals are really pushing for their own publicity. So right now, it's boring to agree with the White House. So am I surprised that I see a lot of these very loud voices who have their own platforms coming out and attacking the president?
So
no,
who do you
but
think
the poll numbers
watching?
are the important
Do you think
thing.
it's Democrats hate watching and suddenly saying, hey, Tucker's making good points after they've called him anti-Semitic? Or is there a real world of people, independent voters?
You're assuming their numbers are growing with their comments.
Yeah,
I don't know that to be the case.
This is a gift for Democrats. We love this, right? Watch these influencers essentially attacking the president. And even if the polls don't reflect it, and I don't think they're right, quite frankly, about the MAGA base, but if they're attacking the president...
You don't think the polls are right?
No, I don't think that the influencers are right at all. I think we're totally out of touch with the MAGA base. I think the MAGA base is in line with where the president is. They support this war. They support the ceasefire. Whatever it is that he does, they're going to support. And so these influencers may actually be losing their influence.
And Trump is starting to tear into them. He went in on Tucker Carlson, calling him a low IQ person. Quote, he calls me all the time. I don't respond to his calls. I don't deal with him. I like dealing with fools. These are not people you thought were fools. We're endorsing you and tearing down.
You never think somebody's a fool when they're supporting you.
I know, but are they being contrarian? Is this contrarianism themselves? Or does it actually reflect certainly the polling when it comes to independence?
If we really want to get to the bottom line, if you listen to what they're saying is, why are we in Iran? If I'm going to get rid of all of the rhetoric that's going on there, why are we in Iran when we have problems here at home with the cost of living, kitchen table topics? We have the midterm elections coming up. Are they wrong about that? No. Are they inflammatory in their language? Yes. The poll numbers that you pointed out at the beginning of this, that's what the White House is paying attention to.
That's right.
When those numbers start to slip, then we can have a whole other conversation.
But I think they completely misunderstand Donald Trump on Iran. The president has been hawkish on Iran for 40 years. He was hawkish in his first term. I don't know where they're coming up with this theory that somehow now all of a sudden they're shocked that he's taking a hard line on Iran.
Here.
They've basically been blinding themselves to
Well, let me pull one more thread. I know we're running out of time, but it looks to me as though this conversation on the right, the new right in particular, which is suffused with anti-Semitism, is a version of the conversation that Democrats and the left struggled with the last election, which is you have a part of your base, a very loud part of your base, that is framing the conversation in ways you can't defend. And right now, the administration feels like it's just ignoring that part of it, right? They're ignoring the fact that after courting a Nick Fuentes for many months, that all of his critiques about Iran also are deeply rooted in anti-Israel and anti-Semitic language.
I think that, Audie, I'm glad you brought that up, and I really do think that the one through line amongst the extreme left and extreme right in this influencer space is their desire to attack Jews on a daily basis. Their obsession with Jews and anti-Semitism is pervasive.
But how long can the White House ignore that part of it?
Well, the president speaks out against anti-Semitism, and I'm going to say that they've taken actions that are controversial, certainly amongst Democrats, but taken actions to try to tamp down on anti-Semitism. And I think he looks at the language coming from Tucker Carlson and others and says, that is off base. Now, he should and can and must do more always, but he has taken it on. In my party, I will say that we are having a fight right now over this, and we do not have clarity enough yet from our leadership to push back against it.
Okay, you guys stay with me. I'm going to pick up some other topics. Right now, it's about